Today, we are going to begin talking about DC motors, which are constructionally similar to DC generators, but which have functionality opposite to that of the DC generator. Basically, you supply DC voltage to the two terminals of the motor and you start seeing the rotation. If you reverse the polarity of the supply, the motor would rotate in the opposite direction. That's obvious. There's a large variety of rules available to figure out the direction of rotation versus polarity versus flux direction, etc. But I'm avoiding all that talk here, because you have been exposed to all that in many other courses. Now, as usual, we classify the operation into two separate categories based on whether the field windings are separately excited or are self-excited. Field windings supply the extra current you need to get good flux out of the poles. These windings can be excited using an independent voltage supply, DC voltage supply, of course, or using the DC input supply to the motor. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So DC motors essentially are the opposite of the DC generators. Constructionally, they are very similar. Let's get started looking at equivalent circuits for various methods used to excite the field windings. Number one is, of course, separately excited case, where the field windings have their own DC voltage input and the motor has its own, the rest of the motor has its own DC input. Okay. Equations are very easy to figure out if you have drawn the equivalent circuit correctly. The terminal voltage Vt, which is supplied to the two terminals available from the motor, for the armature at least, that voltage will always be larger than the EMF generated in the armature. In fact, as a reaction to the applied voltage Vt, the armature generates its EMF. That is why it is called back EMF. And we generally represent it by a symbol EB. Although in many books you will see EA. A means armature. Okay. But I'm going to be calling it EB in my discussions. So Vt minus EB divided by RA will give you the current going in, which can be called terminal current and which also happens to be armature current in case of a separately excited motor. The field current, of course, is simple enough to figure out. IF will be VF divided by RF. The advantage of this method of exciting field windings is that you have total independence for generating phi, which may come very useful in many applications. Of course, the downside is that you need two voltage inputs, VT and VF. VF required will generally not be very large, but you still need a supply for it. Okay. VT denotes the terminal voltage, that is voltage applied to the motor. RA is the resistance of the armature winding. RF is the resistance of the field winding. IF is the field current, and IA is the armature current, which is same as the terminal current in this case. Terminal current is equal to armature current, and the back EMF formula is the same that we saw for generators, for DC generators. Okay, phi ZNP divided by 60A. And it is obvious that IT is VT minus EB divided by RA, in this case at least. And IF is VF divided by RF. And the rest of the things are well known to you from our discussion on generators, meaning of phi, Z, N, P, A, etc. Okay, it's all repeated in this document for the sake of convenience. Now, in case of motors, the mechanical power output matters. We call it PM. Electrical power output will be EB multiplied by IA. Back EMF multiplied by armature current. And if there were no mechanical losses, the electrical power output will be same as mechanical power output. But if there are mechanical losses, then electrical power output minus mechanical power loss will give you mechanical power output. In any case, the mechanical power output PM is related to the corresponding torque Tm by this simple equation 7. Omega is 2 pi n divided by 60. N means capital N, RPM. The units for torque are Newton meter in the MKS system. If no mechanical losses are given, you can simply say PM equal to PE equal to EB into IA. We will be doing that in many cases. Mechanical loss means friction loss and windage loss. Electrical losses, of course, will also be there, which means IA square RA plus IF square RF, which is the total copper loss, and on top of it, core loss or iron loss in the armature. Okay. Power balance or power flow in the machine should be hopefully obvious by now. You supply VT into IT as the electrical power input. From there, IA square RA plus IF square RF will be removed as copper loss. Then P iron will be removed as iron loss. And then some mechanical loss, which whatever we want to call it, will also be removed. And the rest of the power will be coming out as the rotary mechanical power. That's the simple concept in terms of flow of power from input to output. In case of generator, it is the opposite. The rotary power input is where you start, and from there you start subtracting all the losses to get the electrical power out. So the flow of power is opposite here compared to that in case of DC generators. I'll be showing you a PPT later where all this will be explained graphically. Yeah, this equation should be kept in mind. Omega is 2 pi capital N divided by 60. In some books, you will find small n as capital N divided by 60. Small n would be known as RPS, revolutions per second. So if you use that symbol, then omega is 2 pi small n. And electrical power output, as I was mentioning already, is EB multiplied by IA. And from there, mechanical loss in watts will be subtracted to get the total mechanical output power. Power loss due to electrical regions, I have already spoken about it. It's written here. Let us denote this loss by the symbol P loss E. Then we can write P loss E one minute. Yeah, okay. Basically, PI is the input power minus electrical power loss, P loss E, minus mechanical power loss, P loss M, equal to mechanical power output, PM. This is the simple flow of power from input to output. Now, input electrical power, of course, I've written it in words also. Input electrical power minus electrical power loss minus mechanical power loss equal to output mechanical power. This is the flow of power in the machine. I am ignoring stray losses, which are unpredictable losses. That could also happen. But if they were given to you, they would also be subtracted from the input power to get the output mechanical power. Now, electrical power loss will obviously be IA square RA Actually, I have forgotten to write IF square RF would also be there. Fortunately, in case of separately excited motor, we are independently feeding the field winding. So the loss in the field windings, IF square RF, will be ignored from the power flow discussions from the input power VTIT to the output rotary mechanical power. But for all other kind of excitations of field winding, we will have to consider IF square RF also, because that will be taken from the main supply. Here, that is not coming from the main supply, so I'm ignoring it in my equations. It's true only for separately excited motor, that electrical power loss is only IA square RA. And on top of it, iron losses or core losses will be there, which will have a loss due to hysteresis and loss due to eddy currents, exactly like what we saw in case of transformers. We have equations to calculate pH and PE, but we don't generally need them. You are normally given the values of iron losses. Input power, let's call it PI. Again, I am repeating the equation. PI minus P loss E minus P loss M equal to PM, which is mechanical power. Okay, that's the power balance equation. PI is VT into IT. Okay. And PI minus mechanical loss is the electrical output power, EBIA, which is also denoted in many cases by PE. When we do numerical problems, this will become more clear, hopefully. If mechanical losses are negligible, then PM equal to PE, EBIA equal to mechanical power output. And mechanical power output is omega times torque TM. So an approximate equation, if you ignore mechanical losses, is equation 18, which basically connects the electrical quantities to mechanical quantities. The torque is related to back EMF and armature current and RPM, of course, by this approximate equation 18, as long as mechanical losses are not considered. I can take this equation further because I know the value of EB as phi ZNP divided by 60A. And I'm looking at separately excited case right now. So omega Tm will become approximately equal to phi Zn P divided by 60A and the entire thing multiplied by Ia. And omega is 2 pi n by 60. So if I plug that in, in the left hand side of equation 19, n cancels out. So it seems that torque is independent of n, at least in this particular case. This is what you get. Keep in mind that for a given motor, P, A, Z, and probably phi would also be constant all the time. These are machine constants. So this equation simplifies further to give us an approximate equation for torque produced by the motor in case of separate excitation. You can see that torque is proportional, directly proportional to flux produced by the pole, by each pole, I mean, and the armature current. Z, P, and 2 pi A will be fixed anyway, they will not change. So torque is directly proportional to phi into Ia for separately excited motor. This is a very important finding. Okay, let's keep that in mind at least for now. Torque, if, and by the way, so in the separately excited case, generally we will keep Vf constant and Rf is constant anyway. So If will be constant. So flux produced will also be constant. Flux produced is directly proportional to field current as long as the material has not saturated, which the pole material has not saturated. So for most of the time, you can assume that flux is constant in case of a separately excited machine. So the finding further narrows down to simply the fact that the torque produced by a separately excited DC motor is directly proportional to armature current. The more the current in the armature, the higher the torque produced. This is independent of the speed of rotation. These kind of approximate analyses help us in figuring out intuitively what will happen if we increase this and what happens to that, etc., etc. We are trying to study the performance on paper before actually measuring it. If you decide to make phi a constant by changing Vf, then of course you will use equation 22. But if phi is not made a constant, then equation 21 is okay. If phi is made constant, then equation 21 is okay. Typically speaking, phi is almost linearly proportional to IF as long as IF is not too high, because then saturation would come and linearity will break down. So in equation 22, instead of phi, I can say IF. That means torque produced in this case is proportional to the product of IF into IA. Various ways of looking at the same thing, essentially. Okay. Now, shunt excited case. This is one of the most commonly used cases where the field winding is connected in parallel with the armature winding. It is a self-excited case, obviously. I have denoted field current by IF, terminal current by IT, terminal voltage by VT, and armature current by RA. And I'm ignoring brush drop completely. It is obvious that RF into IF will give you VT. That's one equation. Also, VT minus IARA will give you EB. That's second equation. And IT equal to IA plus IF. That will be the third equation. as long as we define currents in the directions shown. So these are the equations that you would be using for figuring out the performance of a shunt excited DC motor. And IF, as long as the terminal voltage doesn't change, IF is a constant, right? And if IF is constant, phi would be constant. So it's very easy to see that torque in this case is proportional to IA. Exactly like what we saw in case of a separately excited motor. You can verify it yourself. By ignoring mechanical losses, you simply do EB into IA equal to omega times Tm. The way we did it here. Okay. And from there, you use this derivation once again. You should be able to show that for a shunt excited DC motor, torque produced is proportional to the armature current. Similar to what we found in case of a separately excited motor. There's a lot of commonality between the performance of a separately excited motor and shunt excited motor. And we are seeing one example right here. Now, series excited motor is a very unusual case because here you put field winding fully in series with armature winding. Equations will be very different in this case, obviously. First of all, IT, IA, and IF are all the same. Now, terminal current or armature current or field current, they are all the same. The only equation you can think of is VT minus EB should be equal to IT multiplied by RA plus RF. That's it. Now, what are the implications? We have seen that torque is proportional to IF into IA. We have proven it. Now, in this case, IF and IA are the same. So, torque will be proportional to IA square. Even for smaller values of IA, enough torque would be produced, which is one of the biggest advantages of series DC motors. They produce larger initial torque when IA is small. Even then, you see a large amount of torque. This doesn't happen in case of separately excited motor or shunt excited motor. Initial torque is much higher in case of a series excited DC motor. In fact, e-rickshaws that you see on the roads use series DC motor because they need initial torque large enough. Even the railway locomotives, electrically run locomotives, typically use series DC motor because they need a lot of torque to get the entire thing started from zero speed to some speed. Shunt DC motor will not be of much use in case of railway locomotives or even in case of e-rickshaws. Series motor is the only solution, especially if you are using only DC motors. If there are AC motors also that can do the job, that's another thing we will come to when we start talking about AC motors. But as long as you are sticking to DC motors, series DC motor is the best option for getting large starting torque. Now, compound winding is a mixture of shunt winding and series winding. Analysis can be done. I've tried it, but generally it is better to do the equations using common sense rather than trying to memorize equations. Here I have broken up the field winding into two components, RF1 and RF2. RF1 is in series with the armature winding, and RF2 is in parallel with the armature winding, or in parallel with the armature. I am calling currents as shown here. IF1 is the same as IF, which is same as IA. IF2, of course, will be VT divided by RF2, and IT, of course, will be equal to IF2 plus IF1, and IF1 is IA. So all that is written here. Depending on the ratio of RF1 and RF2, which is known as level of compounding, if RF2 is very large compared to RF1, you have a motor which is very close to shunt motor. If RF1 is very large compared to RF2, you have a motor which is very close to series motor. And in between, you have performance neither this nor that, but between the two extremes. So RF1 divided by RF2 ratio determines the level of compounding. How close you are to series case versus how close you are to parallel shunt case. So depending on that ratio, the torque versus IA characteristic will change from linear to square. For a series motor, this is the equation governing the behavior of torque with IA. For a shunt motor, the equation was this. For compounded motor, you will have something in between, depending on the level of compounding. You will have neither this nor that, but something in between. So this extra flexibility is what you get if you use compounding instead of shunt or series winding. You can control the nature of characteristic of torque versus IA by changing RF1 to RF2 ratio. This flexibility is highly valued in real life. That's why compounded motors are very commonly used. Now, one more thing which is pertinent to mention right now is this famous equation and implications when the motor has not started. When motor has not started, you have just applied the voltage and motor is not rotating at all. Capital N will be 0 in the beginning. So EB will be 0. Now, if EB is 0, you have a dangerous situation. Why? Let me pull up the equation, then we'll talk. The value of IA is Vt minus Eb and the entire thing divided by Ra. And if Eb is 0, then the value of Ia, at least in the beginning when Eb is 0, the value of Ia will be simply Vt divided by Ra. And Ra is very small, 0.5 ohm, etc. And terminal voltage will generally be 100 volt, 200 volt, etc. So large amount of Ia would flow in the beginning. That would damage the motor. That may damage the motor for sure. Starting a DC motor is a problem because initially Eb is 0. This problem was not seen for generators. There it was a different story. For motors, we got to be very careful about starting methods. This is why I have a small section here talking about the need for a starter. When Vt is applied, motor is initially at a standstill. Standstill means N is 0, which means Eb is 0 in the beginning. Hence, a large armature current, simply Vt divided by Ra, would flow and would damage the motor. So we need a starter. Starter means you have a resistance, variable resistance, a rheostat, let's say, which will have a high value in the beginning, and then you slowly reduce the value. And you put that in series with the armature or in series with the terminal voltage. This is a conceptual solution that comes to mind right away. You put a variable resistor between Vt and the armature. Let the value of this resistor be high enough in the beginning so that the total current going in will be low and safe. And as motor starts picking speed, you start reducing the value of this variable resistor. When motor has the full speed, you almost make this external resistance 0. This is conceptually the starter. Of course, practical implementations are there, which have a lot more detail, but conceptual part is the same. A variable resistor that has the highest value in the beginning, and as motor starts picking speed and Eb starts becoming higher and higher, you gradually reduce the value of this resistor. I have done it myself in the lab several times with my own hands. They train you how to use this starter carefully. Of course, nowadays electronic starters have come in, so you don't have to do anything mechanically. But electronic starters also essentially use electronics to change the resistance value from high to low as motor starts picking the speed. We'll come back to starters later when we do some numerical problems, but I thought the concept should be explained right now. Initially, our external is kept high and as motor starts picking speed and Eb starts building, we gradually reduce our external to a small value. Yeah, I said that already. Now, there is a large variety of starters available in market. Right now, I'm not going to go deeper into each one of them, but at least be aware of the names. 3-point starter, 4-point starter, thyristor starter, which is the electronic starter actually, and no load release coil starter. If time permits, I'll discuss all this by showing you the circuit diagrams for each case. Essentially, point means how many terminals are coming out from the starter, 3, 4, or something else. But the basic idea remains unchanged in all of them. Okay. Another interesting thing to worry about in motors is how to control the speed. This applies to AC motors also, but currently we are going to focus only on DC motors. Speed control of a DC motor. What does it mean? Applications, practical applications always demand that you should be able to control the speed of the motor as you wish. Conceptually, we can classify the methods of speed control of DC motors in several ways. Let's look at it carefully. This is essentially involving changing the methods, figuring out the methods for changing n. What are the methods that you can think of for changing n? You know this equation very well. And you also know that Z, A, and P are constant, and phi may or may not be constant, depending on what you want to do. So I'm going to rewrite this equation in order to figure out what I should be doing to change the speed. Let's see some mathematics first. Equation 2 can be rewritten as equation 33. Equation 2 means this number was already used in the beginning of the document. So I'm not renumbering the equation here. Equation 33 is a new number. Okay, so don't get confused. I mean what I'm writing. So n becomes equal to 60A EB by phi ZB. Now, A is constant, 60 is constant, Z is constant, P is constant. So the only two possibilities for changing n are either you change EB or you change phi. If you change phi, it is called field control. If you change EB, it is called armature control. Conceptually, the methods are of two types, armature control and field control, based on this equation 33. Changing EB means armature control, changing phi means field control. A lot of methods are around which combine the two anyway. So let me look at this equation once again. I have simply written this equation 33 as EB divided by some constant K multiplied by phi. K means, I'm sure you can figure out what K is. It's a constant, okay? Phi Z by 60A. Sorry, no, ZP divided by 60A is the value of K. For a given motor, Z, P, and A are fixed, and hence K is also a fixed value. I told you already. EB is VT minus IARA, right? I'm not talking about series motor right now. I'm talking about DC shunt motor or separately excited DC motor. So N is, if you look at equation 36, which is derived previously for shunt motor or separately excited motor, you can see that using equation 34 in 36, okay, EB, N is EB divided by K phi, and EB is VT minus IARA. So N becomes VT minus IARA divided by K phi. This gives you a very good idea of what you can possibly do to change N. One method is you can change VT, right? Keep everything else fixed. That is one method commonly used. You simply change the supply voltage. That's, and don't change anything else. Okay. The other method could be change RA by putting an extra variable resistance in series with the armature. And the third method can be change phi. So if you are playing with the numerator of this equation, this is armature control. If you're playing with the denominator, then it's field control. Okay. Hence, the speed of the three types of DC motors, series wound, shunt wound, and compound wound, can be controlled by changing the quantities VT, IA, RA, and phi, right? Where phi is controlled by IF, of course, we know that. Yeah. IF determines phi. A similar statement can be made for the separately excited motor also. Yeah. So this statement is true for all DC motors. In the three main methods for speed control for DC motors are hence vary the terminal voltage VT or add a variable resistance in series with the armature resistance or vary the flux by changing the field current. Okay. I'm talking conceptually right now. I'm not showing you any details. The first two fall under the armature control category. Obviously, that's what I was telling you. Because first two essentially play with the numerator of this equation. And the last one falls under field control. Actually, speed control of DC motors remains a topic of research even today. Every month I see new research papers coming out on this. More and more efficient techniques are coming out. But the basics are these. People combine these basics in various different formats. A separately excited or shunt excited DC motor can easily give a constant speed, almost constant speed, because phi is almost independent of IA. For separately excited case, phi is totally independent of armature. And for shunt excited case also, phi is totally independent of IA. Okay. So speed of the motor is almost constant. The changes in load do not affect the speed too much in these cases. For series excited motor, it's a very different case. Let's look at series excited motor a little more in detail. Here IA is same as IF, right? And the basic equation for speed control is this. We have already seen that. And instead of phi, I am putting some constant kf multiplied by if, and if is same as ia. So the equation for speed control for series motor becomes equation 38. In the denominator, there should have been phi, but I have replaced phi by kf-if, where kf is a known constant and field current is same as armature current. So you can further rewrite equation 38 as equation 40 for a series motor. Ra upon kf will be a constant for sure for a given motor. And it would be very small value anyway. RF is generally very large, Ra is very small. So an approximate equation for series excited motors speed is equation 41. K and Kf are constants. So essentially speed is Vt divided by Ia and some constants of proportionality H involved. So what we are seeing is that assuming that Vt is not changing, the larger the armature current, the smaller the speed of a series motor. This is very different from what we saw for shunt or separately excited motor. Speed is inversely proportional to armature current, approximately. DC motor will come to a full stop if armature current is large. As long as Vt is not changed, the motor speed is almost inversely proportional to armature current. Series motor has to be looked at very differently compared to others. But it has its advantages, like initial torque is very high compared to others. So it has its own applications. Oh, yeah, there is a term called speed regulation, which is commonly used for motors, percentage speed regulation. The definition is similar to the definition of voltage regulation in case of generators. What you do is full load speed minus no load speed divided by full load speed, and the result multiplied by 100. That is called speed regulation. Ideally, you would like to see 0% speed regulation. In practice, 5 to 10% is acceptable. And of course, for series motor, it will be very large anyway. For the compound wound DC motor, N versus IA behavior will be somewhere between N equal to constant, which is for shunt motor, and N proportional to 1 upon IA, which is for series motor. Depending on the level of compounding, you will see something in between as far as the behavior of N with IA is concerned. If you want to get a particular N versus IA characteristic, you have to determine the compounding level required. Now, performance characteristics of motors are obviously going to be very different from those of generators. Broadly speaking, there are two categories: electromechanical characteristics and purely mechanical characteristics. Under purely mechanical characteristics, the only one we generally worry about is speed versus torque. Both quantities that you are looking at are mechanical quantities. If the speed goes up, does torque go down or does it go up? Or is it linearly varying or is it varying based on some other law? The electromechanical characteristics have one variable electrical and the other one mechanical. Torque versus armature current is one very important thing to know, and speed versus armature current is the other thing that we would be definitely interested in. So typically speaking, the performance characteristics of DC motors are three: torque versus armature, speed versus armature, torque versus armature current, speed versus armature current, and speed versus torque. Now there are detailed analysis rather, available for each kind of motor so that we can approximately figure out in advance how these performance characteristics would look like. I've tried my best to put it all here in my own document. Books have their own way of doing this. You may not have to remember everything, but at least let me give you the gist of what I have written in my notes. Starting with separately excited DC motor. And let's ignore mechanical losses. In that case, the mechanical power will be same as electrical power, which is EBIA. And mechanical power is omega into torque, machine torque, or motor torque, which is TM. So the equation that will govern the behavior of the motor is equation 42, right? I'm probably repeating this equation. It was mentioned earlier also, I know that, but so be it. And again, we know EB equal to phi ZNP divided by 60A. And for a separately excited motor, phi is constant because IF will not change unless you play with VF, which you generally will not. So EB, and by the way, Z is a constant, P is a constant, A is a constant. And let's say phi is also constant for this particular case. Then EB is simply some constant of proportionality KB multiplied by N. We are theorizing right now to understand what will happen. EB is KB, KB you can figure out very easily from here. EB is KB into N, right? And EBIA is omega TM. So let's combine these two equations. Two pi N divided by 60, entire thing multiplied by Tm, which is omega Tm, equal to EBIA, and EB is KB into N, right? So KB N into IA. Interestingly, N cancels out. Tm versus IA behavior is independent of N. For a separately excited motor, and assuming that mechanical losses are zero. So what I'm getting is this. Tm is linearly proportional to Ia in this case. The larger the armature current, the larger is the torque produced. Of course, there will be a practical limit. You cannot have infinite value of Ia because motor will break down. In fact, if torque is large enough, the mechanical breakdown will happen maybe before the electrical breakdown happens. So don't assume that these equations would apply forever. But within limits, this is a good equation to look at. Km can be figured out based on all this derivation, which turns out to be phi ZP divided by 2 pi A. Okay. And by chance, if phi is not constant and you are varying it also, then you can get phi equal to some constant multiplied by IF. In that case, Km will accordingly change to a different formula. It is obvious that torque Tm is almost linearly proportional to the armature current. Of course, as Ia increases, a saturation would occur. After that, you would rather not operate. Most of the manufacturers give these characteristics of motors in their data sheet, and they tell you safe range of Ia and Tm, which you should not normally exceed. This is all about separately excited motor. Okay. Now, other thing is N versus Ia. How can you figure it out? EB is KB into N, as we have already written. Tm into omega equal to PM equal to EBIA. We know all this, right? And EB is VT minus IA RA. We know this also. So KBN equal to VT minus IA RA. I'm doing a bit of derivation here based on what I know about the operation of the motor. So N can be approximately written as equation 49. KB is a constant. VT, let's assume it's a constant. RA is a constant, of course. So what you see is a straight line between N and IA, but it is not going to pass through zero. And in many cases, you will see that the second term on the right hand side, because RA is very small and KB is generally very large, the second term has some effect on N, but not too much, especially in case of a separately excited motor. So what you see is a straight line, but not very different from a flat line. For a separately excited motor, the speed remains reasonably constant as armature current goes up. Although it is not perfectly constant, it is slowly dropping in a linear manner. But the slope of that curve, slope of that line is not very large. It could be almost a flat line. So it's a constant speed operation, almost constant speed operation that you can expect with changing in armature, with change in armature current. Okay. Now the third one, the mechanical characteristic, N versus Tm. Since omega is proportional to 1 upon Tm for the same power, N is proportional to 1 upon Tm. This is what I figured out. So essentially, this characteristic would typically look like this. The large torque will reduce the speed little bit, not too much, but it would reduce the speed little bit. That slope will depend on machine constants. Okay. Now for shunt excited DC motor, you can do it yourself. You'll find that most of the results for separately excited DC motor apply for shunt excited motor also. Try doing it yourself. Now series excited motor, here it's a very different case. Let's see what happens. Tm we have already seen as EB IA divided by omega approximately. And now for series motor, IA is same as IF. And phi is KF IF. KF is a known constant. That means KF into IA. EB is phi Z and P divided by 60A. There you plug in value of phi as KF into IA. And the rest of the constant is what I'm denoting as KB prime. So Tm versus IA. You can go through my derivations carefully once you get the document. I think you already have the document. I sent you last time. Tm versus IA is approximately a square law curve for a series motor. And Km is a constant which can be determined using this equation. This is an advantage, of course, because initially when IA is small, even then you'll get large torque. Typically, Tm versus IA looks like this. There is a practical limit after which you will not like to operate. That limiting case is based on practical realities. You don't want to break the motor, obviously, by making it produce too much torque or by forcing too much current in the armature. So this is roughly how Tm versus IA characteristic looks like in case of a series DC motor. N versus IA, I've tried to figure it out also based on the knowledge of how the machine operates. What I found was, you can go through it in detail later. What I found was that we get an approximate linear equation. N versus IA is approximately a straight line. In the center at least. Okay. The equation that I got is of this type. Sorry, it's not a straight line. I'm sorry. This is actually inversely proportional to IA. Yeah, it's a series motor. Sorry. N is some constant divided by IA minus another constant. Yeah, it's not, sorry, it's not a straight line. I was thinking of shunt motor. So N versus IA is this kind of behavior, parabolic type of thing. These are approximate findings. Okay, the reality will depend on exact values of constants, etc. The large amount of armature currents will seriously reduce the speed of the motor. We saw that previously also, and we are seeing that again using mathematical analysis. Okay, so I think we are almost done with this talk. The last one is, of course, N versus Tm, purely mechanical characteristic. Again, it turns out that the behavior is something like this. You can double check this in books, but roughly this is what is expected for series motor. Compound motor is a different case. Depending on the level of compounding, the behavior would be between that of a shunt excited motor and that of a series excited. That's the minimum I can tell you. Each case has to be analyzed by itself. Very difficult to come up with equations that would apply all the time. This is why it's important for us to now look at some numerical examples. The most important thing always is to draw the equivalent circuit correctly. And then circuit theory takes over. I'll begin with a simple example first. I'll read it out to you. Consider a shunt wound DC motor running at full speed with the following parameters. Supply voltage, that is terminal voltage, 440 volts. Armature resistance, RA, 1.5 ohm. Field resistance, RF, 200 ohm. RF is generally much higher than RA for shunt motors. Number of conductors on armature, capital Z, is 3000. Number of parallel paths on armature is 2. That means it's a wave wound armature. Number of poles, P equal to 4. Armature revolutions per minute, N is 3000. Flux per pole is 1.4 milliweber. It's a simple calculation, but it illustrates the concepts clearly. They want you to calculate back EMF, then armature current, then field current, then total current drawn, then efficiency, then input electrical power, then output mechanical power, assuming zero mechanical losses and zero iron losses. That means only copper losses will have to be included between input power and output power. Power loss in armature, power loss in field winding, and the torque produced. Part A is the simplest one. EB is phi ZNP divided by 60A. You are given everything. Phi is 1.4 into 10 raised to the power minus 3. Z is 3000. N is also 3000. P is 4. A is 2. So phi ZNP divided by 60A. Part A is simple enough. You get 420 volts. Okay. Part B. Armature current, IA. I have not drawn the diagram of the shunt motor, but I think you should be able to see what I'm doing. This equation was already derived in the previous document. IA is VT minus EB upon RA, right? VT is 440 volts, is given to you. .440 volts, yeah, that's VT. RA is given as 1.5 ohm. So 440 minus 420 divided by 1.5. You should get 13.33 amperes approximately. That's the armature current. Okay. What else do they want? Field current, which is simply VT divided by RF. VT is 440 volts, RF is 200 ohm. VT divided by RF, which works out to 2.2 amperes. Okay. Total current, IT, which is armature current plus field current. So 13.33 plus 2.2 amperes. Okay, 15.53 amperes approximately. That's the total current drawn by the motor. What next? One minute. I'm getting lost. Efficiency, yes. That means in output power divided by input power. In fact, before efficiency, maybe we should calculate powers. In fact, after D, I've gone to E, but let's try F first. Input power. It's simply VT into IT. VT is 440 volts, IT is 15.53 amperes. Multiply the two. Input power is about 6833 watts. Output power is EB into IA. So 420 multiplied by 13.33 amperes. Because mechanical losses are negligible. So electrical output power will be same as mechanical output power. Okay. Now losses are only copper losses. Iron losses are zero, mechanical losses are zero. So IA square RA plus IF square RF. IA square RA turns out to be 266.5 watt. IF square RF turns out to be 968 watt. Now from input power, you subtract the total losses to get the output power. And actually you will find that 6833 minus IA square RA minus IF square RF will actually give 5600. If your calculations are right, input power minus IA square RA minus IF square RF should give you output power, which I calculated directly from EBIA. But I could have calculated it other way around also by subtracting 266.5 plus 968 from 6833 approximately. Double check that power balance is there in the calculation. Okay. Now, efficiency is simply output power upon input power. I can do it directly also without knowing losses. I know EB, I know IA, I know VT, I know IT. So directly from there also, I can calculate efficiency. Or I could have done it after I have completed input-output power calculations. Then I take output power upon input power ratio and multiply the result by 100. I should get the same answer either way, about 82%. And final thing is the torque, which is output power divided by omega. So 5600 divided by omega. Omega is 2 pi n divided by 60. N is 3000. This turns out to be 17.83 Newton meters. This problem is simple, but it essentially helps you in capturing the essence of how the machine operates. Then the next problem is the same problem, but with more realistic description of losses. Repeat problem 1, assuming that iron loss is 200 watts and mechanical loss is 100 watts. EB will not change for sure. It is same as before. IA would also not change, same as before. IF would also not change, same as before. And IT would also not change. These numbers will remain the same. But now power calculation will be different. Output power will be electrical power produced, EBIA, minus iron loss minus mechanical loss. And you are given mechanical loss as 100 watt and iron loss as 200 watts. So EBIA minus 300, 5600 minus 300. And in the denominator, of course, you'll get VTIT, as we got in the previous case also. So efficiency turns out to be now 77.56% compared to 82% that we found in the previous case. Here, we were idealizing the situation by ignoring iron losses and mechanical losses. So we got a higher efficiency here. But next problem is more realistic. Efficiency has fallen now to 77.56%. Input power, of course, will be VTIT. Okay, there's no change. But output power will be input power minus copper losses, which are known to us from previous problem, minus mechanical loss minus iron loss. You can double check all this. So output power now will be what we got in previous problem minus 300 watt, which is 200 plus 100. So 5300 watt is the output power. Armature power loss in armature, of course, these losses are the same. IA square RA and IF square RF will not change. They are same values as we got in the problem one. Torque, of course, will change now. In problem one, we were using 5600 watt as the output power. Now that number is changed to 5300 watt. So torque will go down in this case to 16.87 Newton. Okay. One thing which I have not included in any of these problems is the brush loss. Supposing I have told you that brushes are dropping 1 volt per brush, then some change will have to be made here. IA will not be VT minus EB upon RA. IA actually will be VT minus 2 minus EB divided by RA. 2 volt drop because of brushes will have to be included in this equation. That is not done in this document, but I want you to be aware. We'll be coming back to that anyway in other problems. It will change the results slightly. Okay, this problem is simple, I think, very easy. A DC motor operates from a 240 volt supply, okay. That means VT is 240 volt. Armature resistance is 0.2 ohm, RA is 0.2 ohm. Determine the back EMF when the armature current is 50 amperes. Simple. This equation. We are ignoring, of course, brush drop. EB is VT. They are calling it V. I call it VT. EB is VT minus IARA. And this, by the way, would apply no matter whether the motor is shunt excited or separately excited. For series excited, it's a different case. You will have to know the field resistance. That has to be included here. EB will be V minus IARA minus IARF, because field resistance will be in series with RA in that case. But for all other cases, I think this equation is good. So back EMF turns out to be 230 volt based on this simple calculation. Give me 2 more minutes. We have to continue next time, obviously. Yeah, this problem is already done, so I'm going to ignore this. It's repeated in this document as well. Yeah, this is already taken care of. So this actually is the same document. There's no change. Fine. Let's try. We may not be able to finish this, but I want you to read this statement at least carefully, and we'll continue next time. A 220 volt DC shunt motor has RA equal to 0.2 ohm, RF equal to 220 ohm. The motor is driving a constant load power. That means power being drawn mechanically is not changing and is running at 1000 RPM. And the total current drawn by the motor is 10 amperes. Calculate the new speed and new armature current if an external armature resistance of value 5 ohm is inserted in the armature circuit. So we'll continue next time, but important thing that I want you to remember is that you have to draw the equivalent circuit very carefully by reading the problem slowly and methodically. Don't make a mistake in drawing the equivalent circuit. After that, circuit theory takes over. So see this equivalent circuit that I have drawn based on the statement of the problem. It's a shunt excited motor, so I am showing RF in parallel with armature. And they are telling me that they are connecting an external resistance in series with the armature. So I'm showing that as REXT in series with RA. And the rest of the story is, I think, well known by now. Okay. We will solve this problem.